Okay, it's time to do the gold valve installation on this shock. So I'm going to try to go through this step by step. This is the second time I've done this. I've got a different video where I do it for the first time on my XR600, although I didn't do any revalving. All I did was rebuild the shock. On this one, I'm going to do the gold valves. So first things first, we're going to got the spring off of it and everything, got the thing cleaned up so you don't get a lot of dirt in there. We're going to clean it up again when we get it all taken apart. First step though is I'm going to release all of the air or nitrogen or whatever's in here out of this thing here, and you want to use a rag just in case. That it's pretty high pressure, so you don't want to get that all over. So now that that pressure is gone, you can see that the shock is falling in as the bladder in here is compressing under the weight of this. Anyway, so that's cleared out. So now what we want to do is we need to get this bladder out of here. Let me get a special tool. Really anything will work that will push on this. This is actually for the seal head. I just wanted to see if this would work to push this in. The other thing you can do, this just doesn't seem to be quite the right size, just get a big socket or something. Just give it a gentle whack here. So now you can see, hopefully, I move the camera over here so you can see this, now that I've pushed this in fact, maybe I'll let a little bit of that pressure out. As you push it in, you let out pressure, make it easier. And now you have this snap ring around here that is now accessible. So now we're gonna pry that snap ring out. One thing I did forget, safety glasses are a good idea when you're working with stuff under high pressure. If this flings off of here, might not be such a great situation. So I'm gonna try to push this down just a little more. Now at this point, since it's broken loose, I can actually push this down with my fingers. Now I have plenty of room to pry on this thing. And it does want to turn inside of here, so you almost have to hold it. Okay, this was way more of a pain than I really thought it was going to be. So here it is bed up. I had to really dig in there and get that thing out of there. It's just really in there. Once I got it out of there though, wasn't a big deal. Just took a lot of finagling and several different tools and screwdrivers and things to get that thing dug out of there. It was just in there really good. Okay, I got this pushed down so I can get something underneath. There we go. It's out of there. Success. Anyway, so now with some finagling, there we go. Let's kind of pop out of here. This is probably a good thing. The seal's tight. I'm gonna be careful doing this. You don't want to mar it up, but there we go. Just needed a little coaxing. There we go. Some spillage since I pushed that in. Hold this all the way out. Very bubbly. Not sure if that means seals are blown or what on this. All right, so this is the bladder, comes out. And then at this point we can dump the oil. Okay, so back in the soft jaws we go. So now we need to get this off of here. So this type is a pry-off type. I don't want to mar up the surface. Use something flatter like an Allen wrench or something round, or I don't want to bend that. Maybe this pick I've got here. Nope. Need something strong enough to pry that off of there. I may have to grind down a screwdriver or something to get that off of there. This is a blunt punch, or at least one that I've worn out on other things, so there's no sharp edges on it. I wonder if I can get under there. Doesn't look like I'm going to be able to very well. Nope, let's try something else. One thing you can do is get a wood chisel. It's nice and sharp, get under there. The only problem is you're going to kind of ruin that edge, so you're going to have to sharpen it again if you're going to use it for wood. But that's sharp, so it gets under there nice. This is probably the hardest part of the whole thing here, is getting this stupid thing off. Allen keys might work better now. Something a little bit flatter on the side. Now that it's cracked loose, it'll come off. I'm just bending my Allen keys. That thing is really on there. On my XR600, it has a Showa shock, and it doesn't even have the little holes here to pry on, so you have to do it with the chisel like this in the beginning to get it off of there. There we go. So you just go around the outside, work that thing off of there. Try to get it off as straight as you can, and try not to mar up the surface on your shock as best you can. Success. All right, so we got this little cap off of here. So now we have basically the same thing going on this side as we did over here. We have a snap ring in here. And so now I've got this nice tool that comes in. I can push on this. And once that drops in, now I have full access to this clip in here. So kind of the same story here. We got to get this circlip out of here. This one came out a lot easier than the other one once I get underneath it. Oh shoot. Well, now it went back in its hole. Go. Anyway, just take some finagle in there to get that out of there. Okay, so now a lot of dirt and stuff in here. Now you can just take the seal and everything out. You can make a mess like I did if you want. And there we go. So that is what the inside of your rear shock looks like. So here's the piston and the valve stacks here, and this down here controls your compression, and this is your rebound up here on the top. And then this is the seal assembly, which for how loose this is, I have a strong feeling that's blown, and I'm going to replace it. I didn't think it was blown, so I didn't buy the parts, so that's another part I need to get on order before I can even finish this thing. So I'm going to end up moving on to the shocks and doing those first, and then waiting for the new seal to come in. Normally, if you're just changing the valving like I'm doing today, you don't necessarily have to change the seal. If the seal's good, you just change this valving and put it all back together. So looks like I'm going to have to get a new seal head for that. The other way you can tell that seal is blown is the oil that came out was really bubbly and thin. It just didn't seem clean to me. So sometimes that indicates the seal isn't perfectly good. The other thing that concerned me was there was not a lot of pressure in this bladder. When I released that pressure, there was almost nothing in there. That doesn't necessarily mean that this bladder is no good, but it could mean that. It could mean the valve is leaking a little bit, but I don't think this has ever been rebuilt since it was brand new, so I guess I'm not surprised. I'll get some new parts for this thing and get it back together. But I'm going to clean up these parts first and put the, I guess I can't put the new valving on it until I put the new seals on, so I'm going to have to wait for that. We're going to continue working on this rear shock. I'm going to put this thing back together. So I've got an interesting development here. Since this seal doesn't really feel perfect, I'm afraid it might be blown, but I don't have time to wait for a new one before my next race, so I am going to leave it on there and kind of hope that it works. Since I'm not totally confident in that seal, I'm just going to use some other suspension fluid I had that's a little cheaper instead of using the Racetech stuff just because it's so expensive, and we'll see how that goes. So the first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to replace this with the gold valves that I was going to do before, and I'm probably going to leave this seal on, but we'll see. I can probably take it off, but I'm going to have to reuse it, so I got to be careful with that. First thing that's got to happen is this peening has to come off of here, otherwise you can't get the nut off. If this proves to take too long, I'm just going to go over on the bench grinder and grind it off. I give up. Bench grinder. Okay, trip to the bench grinder, and finished it off with the file. Should be able to get this nut off of here now. This is still pretty stiff. Put it back on. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so there was a little bit of extra here on the top, as you can see. That should have been ground off probably. That peening is pretty deep on this stuff. That's better, but you definitely don't want to strip it out. There we go. So then we want to chamfer this so that we want to get all that peening off. And we want the threads to go on nice and easy. So light on the file, and just take your time. I think this part here is most of my peening that was in the way. Might have to go a little further to make sure this nut goes on and off easy. There we go. Very little drag goes on, no stripping. Just had to take more off than I kind of thought I'd have to. All right, so backing plate, this is the stock rebound stack. And this, the stock piston. And that is the stock compression stack and the base plate. All right. So what I'm going to do now is clean this up. I'm going to record what the stock settings were just for fun. I'd like to know what the stock stuff was. And then I'm going to come in here and put the gold valve assembly on here, clean this all up, and start getting it back together. Okay, went ahead and I built my stack here. This is the one that came up for me, so I have it all put here on this pick here. You can use a piece of welding rod or wire or whatever, but it makes it a little easier to get it on that way. So it just goes on like that. Of course, I had my base plate under here like I had before. Perfect. So this is important. When you put this washer on, it has to straddle this lip here. Looks like it's going to do that. It looks pretty good. Looks about right for the nut too. So put a little bit of Loctite on here. I test fit this before, it went right on. What's going on here? There we go. So then this has to be torqued to a specific torque value, which I'm going to look up in a second. Okay, Loctite goes away. All right, got 25 foot-pounds. There we go. Ready to rock. So this is ready to put back in. The only other piece that we'll have to put on, there's this O-ring here that you put on the gold valve piston, and then this is the skirt that goes around it, and that has to go in when we install it. So let's take this out of the vise. This is ready to go. Make sure you keep this nice and clean. The next step is to put this back in. So what we're going to do now is we're going to install, I already went through and cleaned all this up, we're going to install all this stuff. Okay, so the first part is we got to put the bladder side in. So take your end cap, obviously all clean, put that on there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill this with suspension oil on this side. And you want about enough in there so that this overflows when you stick it in there. And I have maybe a little too much in there, but that's okay. We'll deal with it here. Stick a rag around here so I don't make such a big mess. I'll probably put a little more than I needed in there, but that's okay. The main thing is you want this to overflow, and then you're going to press the cap in, and what that ensures is that there's no air under here. And then you're going to push it in a little further, because what we're going to do is just far enough so that we can get that clip in there. Okay. So let me find the clip. I think I put the wrong clip. They're very similar in size, and this doesn't look quite right. It's too loose. Yeah, it's way too easy to get out. I'll have to use the other one. Note for next time, I'll keep track of which is which. There we go. Much better. That's the way it should work. So that's seated in there. All right. Now what we want to do, I'll wipe my hands off again, I'm trying to keep things clean. We're going to put a little bit of air in here, and that's going to allow this to come all the way up against this ring here. So this is the tool I'm going to use to fill it up with air when we're done. But you only want to put about 40 pounds-ish, something like that in here. And you can already see that cap is rising up in there. It should seat against the ring, which it has. Looks good. And we are at at about 40 pounds-ish. There we go, almost exactly 40 pounds now. That's pretty good. And you want to leave that air pressure in there. I'll show you why in just a minute. So now we're going to be doing the other side. This is a similar deal. We're going to put enough oil. There was already oil forced in here from the other side, but we want to have enough oil in here to where we can push our piston back and forth in here and bleed it out. Make sure this is clean. I have to admit, this skirt on this gold valve is a little bit of a pain to get pushed in there correctly. All it wants to do is come off. It's hard to keep it tight. There's no way to hold it. Having a little trouble here. Hang on. There we go. If I put the open end of that ring against the side, then kind of crank it in, it seems to work pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna need a little more oil in here. So I've got oil out to about here. And what you want to do is you want to hear air bubbles coming out because you're trying to bleed this. But we do not want more air getting sucked back in. So you don't want to pull the piston out of that oil. You want to give it, you push it in, you want to give it a pretty good shove so you can get all those air bubbles out. I'm going to actually put a little bit more in here. So I got oil up to about here now. And again, when we push this seal in later, in just a few minutes, it's going to do the same thing here. It's going to overflow so that we don't have any air in there. So you don't want to let the piston come out of oil because we're bleeding all the air out of it. And I'm pushing and pulling pretty hard so that you get any air bubbles out of there. So it's bleeding. All right. And put just a little more oil in. That's probably enough. I got oil right about to here, about the bottom of the clips. There's the little lips in there. And it's time to push the seal in. I need a little bit more though. We want enough oil that it overflows. There we go. So as soon as we get to this O-ring, oil is incompressible. So if we did a good job, which I think we have, you won't be able to push that anymore. Well, what do? Well, that's why we have some air pressure in here. We're going to release this pressure while we push down. See, it didn't take much. Now I can push that back in. Let me get my shock setting tool. This tool is worth its weight in gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the seal down and pull this piston up so I can get this in here. I'm going to push down. There we go. So there. So I've pushed that down far enough that I should be able to get the clip on there, maybe a little bit more. So then this clip goes in the lip in there, just like when we took it out. Same thing. Push that in with a screwdriver. Make sure that it's clipped in all the way around. Looks like it is. So that is good to go. You know, these little breather holes on this cap, you want those to be forward and backward on the shock. So line it up with the top here is what I do. That way it lines up good. And then when you put that together, you just want a something soft. I got a piece of wood here that I can have a plastic hammer or something like that will work well here. All right, so that's there. So this should move back and forth. All right, so now there's no air in this, so this needs to be on my model. Race Tech says 165 pounds, so here we go. So the first little bit of pressure though, I'm going to be a little bit careful with this and make sure that this is seated good, otherwise it can pop off of there. And you'll see that this bladder is pushing on the oil, so it's actually expanding the shock a little bit. And that's a good sign, it's supposed to do that. So we're up to about 80 pounds now, so now it comes back on its own. I don't hear any air bubbles. All good things. I'm surprised how many pumps this takes for how little volume is actually in that, but that's the way it goes. All right, 165. I'm going to go a couple of extra pounds just for the loss when you take it out. 168 is what I got here. Good deal. Then you put the little Schrader valve on there. And that's how you rebuild the rear shock. So really all that's left on this, obviously put the spring on it and everything, but it just has to go back on the bike. But that's the hard part is over. I think we're good to go. Everything works like it's supposed to. I like it. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope this was educational and helpful to somebody, and I'll see you next time.